Fabulous listeners, you're tuning into the Exe Files, the show that brings you everything strange. And that was the theme tune to The Fog by John Carpenter, the famous horror director and also the writer of Pinocchio. And that was chosen by our very special guest, Mr. John Pertwee, who we'll be talking to a little bit later on tonight. I'm Richard Freeman. I'm here with my co-host.
Hello, I'm Alison Rockbrand. Welcome to the Exe Files on Phonic FM.
Well, as usual, we're going to be starting off with a bit of strange news. Ooh, we're getting some hideous feedback here from somewhere. Let's see if we can do something about that.
No, okay. Oh, okay.
Oh,
okay,
crumbs.
just don't move your headphones too much. You have to stay in one position and not move. You're not allowed moving anymore.
Right, there.
That's better.
I think that's calmed it down somewhat. Oh.
Okay. Sorry, just carry on.
Around about 100 years ago, this week, Stonehenge was up for sale. It's strange to think that England's most significant monument was once brought by a barrister as a present for his wife, or so the theory goes. Another is that he feared a rich American might take it. Whatever the motivation, 100 years ago, on the 21st of September 1915, Cecil Chubb paid £6,600 for the monument in an auctionery at Salisbury, Wiltshire. It happened, he said, on a whim. Chubb's wife Mary was reportedly less than grateful for the romantic gesture, possibly because the price equated for £680,000 in today's money. It's said that Mary wanted Cecil to buy a set of curtains at the auction, and says Stonehenge's creator Heather Sabir. He came back with something rather different. On the 26th of October 1918, 16 days after armistice ended World War I, Chubb passed Stonehenge into public ownership via a deed of gift. The next Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, recognised his generosity with the title, Chubb becoming Sir Cecil Chubb, 1st Baronet of Stonehenge. To mark this, Chubb had a coat of arms made up bearing a silver lion's leg grasping 2 branches of mistletoe, a plant regarded as sacred to the Druids who, people believed then, worshipped at Stonehenge. The coat of arms bore the motto Saxis Conditium, meaning founded on stone. Chubb had come from humble origins. Born in 1876, his father was a saddler and harness maker in the village of Shirton, a few miles from Stonehenge. He attended grammar school, working his way via stint as a student teacher to Cambridge University. He became a barrister and amassed a considerable fortune. Chubb didn't forget his roots when he gave Stonehenge away. His deed of gift stipulated that public shouldn't pay a sum exceeding 1 shilling per visit. A special agreement with the parish council said local people could get in for nothing.
What? Sorry, Richard's just unplugging his headphones and handing them to me so I can fix them. Richard, carry on. You're fine.
A new breed of giant aggressive rats are terrorising bin men by chasing them on their rounds. The rodents have grown bigger and more fearless and more aggressive, according to one bin man who had to take cover when one tried to attack him. Ben Landrigcombe, 34, posed with one of the huge foot-long rats he caught in Plymouth, Devon, after finding it behind a skip. The street and refuse collector for Plymouth City Council said, "When I was attacked, it was a terrifying experience. The rat was aggressive and huge, and I tried to shoo it off. But the rat did not back down at all. It had its teeth bared, and it stood its ground like an alpha male whose territory had been invaded. I'm used to rats. I see so many on my job. I deal with rubbish after all. But I've always been okay with them. But I know they're not afraid anymore, and that does worry me. This latest one was over a foot long, I reckon. It's huge, but I've seen this size and possibly even bigger in the last couple of months. They're definitely getting bigger. And also, they're not afraid of you the way they used to be. I got chased by one. He added that the latest freak did not seem to be afraid of humans, and he only got rid of it by throwing a brick at it. Frighteningly, the refuse worker said he'd seen the mother of all mothers before, which was even bigger, and he was not able to get a picture of it. Plymouth City Council spokesman said that rats carried diseases including salmonella, Wales disease, E. coli, cryptosporidiosis, which shut down Manchester's water supply last month, and tuberculosis. Mites, fleas and ticks are also carried on rats, and any rat in your home is extremely serious and should be treated urgently. The discovery of giant rats in Plymouth comes just months after several NHS trusts found rats the size of small dogs in hospitals, leaving them fearing that the vermin would chew their way through medical equipment, wires, or contaminate medical supplies with urine and droppings. British exterminators at the time were calling for the government to grant more powers to use stronger poison, as they felt the sole solution to getting rid of the disease-ridden rodents. They feared the number of rats could double to 160 million by the end of this year, with some of them growing 2 feet long, nearly the same length as the ones Mr. Landiscrum had seen. Genetic testing by Huddersfield University reveals that the vermin have developed a mutation allowing them to survive the same conventional poisons that have been used since the 1950s. Has anybody got a Chinese fowling piece?
That's a really disturbing and disgusting little piece there. Thanks, Richard.
Well, I'm rather fond of rats. I admire their adaptability. And they can survive just about everywhere. They've even been found in big cabinet freezers and having grown long hair and eating a diet of solely frozen meat.
Well, I hate rats. I think they're disgusting. They freak me out, and I totally can't stand them. So, I'm really freaked out now. Thanks. Thanks. Let's talk to our guest.
Hi, John, are you there?
Oh, I'm here. Hello, how are you both?
Hello, good.
Good. I'm sorry I'm a bit growly, but I've had a cold for about 3 weeks. I was actually in a giant freezer with this long-haired rat, and I desperately didn't want to leave. So it's a pleasure and indeed an honour to be on the show. I've been listening in the past few weeks. It's really entertaining.
Okay, hang on. Sorry, just there's a little technical problem with one of the.
My headphones are going berserk.
Unplug it. Okay, Richard, come over to this side, and you can talk to John, and I'll have a little look at it.
Hi, John. We've switched headphones because mine has gone berserk for some reason.
Okay, mate.
I've no idea. They haven't done that before, not to that extent, anyway. So, how are you anyway?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. It's just approaching the kind of the autumn time in the Midlands, so it's starting to get a bit on the brisk side. And as you know, the winters up here are extreme. It's kind of like a mini Game of Thrones.
Yeah. So, basically, we've been saying we're having John Pertwee on the show. So we're not speaking to the great late lamented John Pertwee from beyond the grave. You're a completely different John Pertwee, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I had some time ago, a couple of years ago, because of the unfortunateness of my younger years, I've always been a massive fan of Doctor Who, a huge fan. And I was actually born during an episode, not because of an episode. And it turned out that I was discussing with my partner Tara that neither of us liked our names. So we were going to change our names, and I was originally going to call myself John Mills, because I thought, well, that's two very short names. And then she said that she didn't like her name, so she changed it to Tara. And I thought, well, as I've got the Doctor Who thing going on, I'd change it to Pertwee, who was indeed, obviously, the best Doctor in my humble opinion.
Oh, right. Yeah. So can you tell us a bit about your background then, and how you got into interviewing various people from stage and screen?
Well, interestingly enough, I've always been into science fiction, and my first memory was in a kind of a television viewing room in Minehead, and there was this giant television screen. It must have been about 7 or 8 inches big. And it was sat in the middle of the lounge, and showing on this screen was the black and white classic Tarantula, and that basically opened the door for my liking all sorts of strange and unusual things, especially monster movies. Now I got into interviewing people through I started off doing hospital radio and went from there into working for the BBC. This was about 25 years ago, and I've interviewed just about everyone that I've always been a fan of, everyone from Christopher Lee, and indeed I went round and sat in Tim Burton's house and dined on ginger biscuits and drank tea. So yes, it's been tremendously interesting.
Fantastic. And out of all these people that you've interviewed, do you have particular ones that stand out, or ones that are particularly memorable?
Well, yes, I must admit Tim Burton was a great surprise. I expected him to live in kind of a weird, dark, sort of twisted turn of the kind of house, but he's got basically just a house in Camden, and he lives there next door, or he lived there next door to Helena Bonham Carter. There was a giant green door that separated Tim Burton's house from Helena Bonham Carter, and I saw her very briefly as she kind of drifted through. But I spent about 2 hours talking to him, and this was the time that I think Sweeney Todd had come out, or just before Sweeney Todd had come out, and I thought that he was going to be a very strange, different guy, but he was very, very interesting. And he was a massive fan of the old school horrors, so he liked Vincent Price and Christopher Lee. He was a massive fan on, and as you know, he managed to get Christopher into several of his films, even if it was only as a cameo role. But he was very serious and very, very keen that he knew that the multiplexes and the video stores and everything were just jam-packed with CGI pap, basically, and he wanted to tell different type of tales. So that's why each one of the Tim Burton film has got a dark gothic feel to it. So because he'd grown up very much on his own, and kind of having his only friend was his imagination.
What is the single strangest interview you've ever had then with anybody?
Oh yes, well, very strange. Well, the strangest interview I've ever had was with Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep turned up, and she'd been in this country for a couple of days, and she was over here to talk about Lemony Snicket, and she was completely and utterly out of it, just completely away with the fairies, or with some other flying form. The questions that we were asking her, she just kind of gave this vague, disdained look, as though she was completely and utterly riding around on a space hopper. She had just had no clue about the film, who we were, even though we all had badges saying that we were with the press. So the questions that she gave were just completely and utterly bananas. And that was a very, very strange experience. It lasted overall, the interview lasted about 45 minutes, and we must have got, I think possibly about 3.5 minutes of viable answers. But again, I was quite interested, because I went round and met a Hammer horror heroine of mine, who was Ingrid Pitt.
Oh, yes.
Ingrid Pitt not only had appeared in Doctor Who, but was well known to Hammer fans as Countess Dracula. And she's kept a prop from a lot of the films that she was in, and she's kept the throne which sat in her flat. She married a racing driver, sat in her flat, so she got this giant Countess Dracula throne that we were honoured enough to sit in. And when we knocked on the door and turned up at her flat, she kind of opened the door as this grandiose, snarling, aged vampire character. And she sat us all down, and she'd made these homemade Hungarian biscuits. I'm presuming they were Hungarian. She told us that they were. And she spent ages and ages and ages. Again, we were sat there for about 3 hours, as she didn't answer any questions at all. Not a question. But she did tell us how she battled the Nazis, and how they'd managed to get her and her friends and stored them away in cupboards, and they managed to break free during one night. And she says, and I crept up towards them and I stabbed them as they slept. So she was a very, very unusual woman. And even when I asked her questions about, she was in Where Eagles Dare, and she said, yeah, you're not interested in that. Let me tell you about Elvis Presley. So she was tremendously eccentric, but again, a really, really nice lady. So I had gone with a friend of mine, and she kept making gentle, and indeed not so gentle, advances towards him, saying, when this interview is finished, you and I will cuddle.
Lucky him.
Which was a little bit disturbing.
She was.
And she was almost kind of just telling it, that even though there were two of us there, she was kind of just talking straight to him, and she says, in the nights in Hungary, it gets very cold. And of course, my mate who I'd gone with was desperately trying to edge his way away from her and try and enjoy the Hungarian biscuits.
She was Arthur Scargill's favourite actress.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, dear me. Yes, indeed. As is her brother Brad.
No.
But no, she was very, very interesting, and she signed the Countess Dracula poster, and she got to the stage like a lot of later actors, where their work that they'd made 20, 30 years ago was up for re-evaluation because it was all coming out of the DVD. So she'd given a commentary on some of the DVDs with some of the films that she was in.
Oh, splendid. So you've not only interviewed film actors, but you've interviewed lots of people from classic cult television as well.
Yes, I have. One of the ones that you might be familiar with was Peter Wingard. I spoke to Peter,
yes, from
Peter
Department
recently.
S. Jason King himself.
Yes, that's it. Now, Peter Wingard was tremendously suave with a capital S. And Jason King, and not only that, but he appeared in a Doctor Who story called The Planet of Fire. And Peter Wingard now is tremendously old and looks a lot like Charles Middleton's Emperor Ming. And he's kind of sat there with this kind of like baseball cap on, this very, very ominous kind of beard and mysterious look. And he says that when they were making Planet of Fire, Peter Wingard was tremendously friendly with a couple of male members of the crew, so a couple of the male actors, and he says that they wanted to, because it was all filmed in Lanzarote, that particular story. And he said, I tell you what, my dear, he says, I'll help you rent a car. So they rented this car using Peter Wingard's name, and he went along and said, I vouch for these people, my darling, and it's wonderful. And what happened is, while they were out driving around, they turned the car over, these lads turned the car over, and almost completely destroyed it. And Peter Wingard took it back to the car rental agency, and he was absolutely furious with the bloke that was there. And he says, this is an absolute outrage. I won't use the language that he used. He said, how dare you try and fob this car off onto me? He says, it's an absolute disgrace. I nearly died. And he says, and it would have been your responsibility. He says, it's a disgrace. He says, I'm never ever renting from you again. And even though there was practically like 2 tyres and 1 door left of this car after they'd wrecked it, Peter Wingard still had the audacity and the charm to manage them, to let them think that they'd lent these people an absolute rent.
And he got away with it as well.
Yes, absolutely.
That's wonderful. Yes, yeah. I mean, I've been at a couple of your interviews. I remember when we had the Toast of Sutek.
That's right. That's right. Well, Sutek, the Destroyer, was Gabriel Wolf, and he really, really does not like conventions and meeting fans and things like that. He's quite happy on his own, being sat alone, not speaking to anyone, and just being left to do his lines. He's a very, very private man, and we turned up at his house, and bear in mind, Pyramids of Mars is thought of as one of the greatest shows ever, and it was a little bit strange listening to this guy who'd voiced this character all these years ago, and he'd laid out this marvellous breakfast table with toast and tea and jams and all sorts of things, and he really, really just wanted to be left alone. Of course, he's kind of come back into it recently because he's the voice of the Ood.
Yes, and the devil in Satan Pit.
That's right, yes, absolutely.
And I always thought Pyramids of Mars was so much better.
Yes, it is. But I think that's something to do with that particular era, isn't it? The dark and gothic era works tremendously well with Doctor Who.
And earlier tonight on this very channel, on Phonic Screwdriver, they were talking to Katie Manning. The lovely Katie Manning, who both of us
yes, Katie Manning's a delight. Katie Manning does a whole load of different characters, and I think she plays Iris Wildthorn. Is that Iris
Wildthorn? Yes.
That's it. Yeah, on the Big Finish. She's a lovely lady.
And the original Jo Grant, my very favourite companion.
Yes, she was a delight. And
you have a dog called Jo Grant, don't you?
Yes. She's now Jo Grant's had to be rehomed.
Oh
now.
dear.
Because she would, when we'd be sitting in the room, she would try and sit as far away from us as humanly possible. So I get the feeling kind of the dog didn't really like us very much. It might be, but Jo Grant perhaps wasn't her favourite assistant. But now she's very, very happy and living with a couple and stealing toast off plates.
Mm. So what do you think really has gone wrong with horror films lately? Because you have to look, there are still good horror films about, but you have to look long and hard for them.
Yeah, I totally agree, Richard. The horror film, classic horror film era seems to be dead. It's very difficult to find a good horror film nowadays, that is mainstream, that people can, in the cinema, for instance, that's actually good.
World cinema, you still get them, but yeah, mainstream cinema, it's all zombies and vampires till the cows come home.
Yeah, I think the reason is that zombies especially and vampires put bombs onto seats, and people like that sort of thing. So it's very, very easy to just attack them on a thing, and they know that it's practically a guaranteed audience. There was a recent one called When the Lights Go Out.
Oh yes, that was a wonderful, set in Yorkshire.
Yes,
the Black Monk. Yeah,
that's right. That's a great film, genuinely creepy,
based on a real story. Based on
yes, that's it.
Infestation.
But I think that's the problem. Again, a problem with a lot of the CGI films is that they just feel that they can put extra CGI in, and they kind of miss the atmosphere. They seem to have stepped away from the glory days of Hammer films and the psychological horrors.
Did you catch the Enfield Poltergeist?
I did. Yes, I thought
that was wonderful.
Great performance from everyone, especially Timothy Spall as the kind of doubting psychic, wasn't he? He wasn't too sure.
And not so long after that, I went and saw the real guy, the real not his character, but Matthew McFadden's character.
All right.
The real Guy Leon Playfair, and heard him talk about the actual Enfield Poltergeist case, and he was saying most of the stuff, the really good stuff, they didn't put in.
Right.
I said that the girl herself was actually transported through a solid wall to the house next door, and she brought a book back with her to prove it. And she said when she was in the house next door, everything looked white for some reason. But it was he was saying but the bit in the film where he's picked up and slammed against the wall by the poltergeist, he said that didn't happen, but much stranger stuff did that they didn't actually put in.
I think they have to try and appeal to a certain type of audience as well. They have to, because a lot of the audience have been brought down thanks to the unmightiness of reality TV, and I think that there was a fairly recent TV show. I'm just trying to think. I think it was called Apparitions, and it had Martin Shaw in it.
Oh yes, I recall that.
That was great. It was grim and it was dark, and it was on the BBC, and I think it only ran for about 6 episodes. But that was tremendously good. Great television, really, really good. Almost as good as Ghostwatch.
There's Ghostwatch by the wonderful Stephen Volk.
Absolutely.
Yes, what a great piece of groundbreaking television that was. It was wonderful. Yeah, and of course Stephen Volk's he's got a new supernatural drama out now on ITV.
He has. I've yet to see it. We've got it recorded. I recently read the book Whitstable, which tells of the tale of a retired Peter Cushing and how he has to battle a real-life vampire. That is definitely well worth catching if either of you get the chance to read that.
That's one for the list. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I spoke to Stephen, and he allowed me to do a small reading of it on YouTube, and he was dead chuffed with my reading.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy and a very good writer. Yeah. Now, on the subject of ghosts and things, you have actually seen a ghost, haven't you?
I have. It was a while ago, but we were travelling across Woodbury Common at 3 o'clock in the morning, and where the halfway house is. There's a road that comes out from Exmouth, and then there's a junction in the middle, and then you pull in down by where the halfway house. And I was with my mate, who's Mr. Testosterone. He's the world's most masculine man, and he was driving. And because it was 3 o'clock, he thought, I'm not going to bother stopping, so we just drove straight across. And unfortunately, just by the side of the pub, the headlights hit this guy that was just stood right there, and he was about 5'9", something like that, in a great big tall black hat and carrying a Gladstone bag, and he looked a little bit like Dr. Mop off Chigley or Trumpton or one of those programs, and you could see him literally as clear as day. And the guy stepped into the road, and we just drove straight through him, and as we drove through him, he dissolved. It was quite strange because he was there and there was no reflective surfaces or anything like that. It was just a human being caught in the headlights. When we brought the car to a screeching halt, my mate got out and instantly burst into floods of tears, crying his heart out because he thought he'd killed someone. And when I went back the next day, and they said that in the early days of the 19th century, a doctor had been killed by a horse and cart as he'd gone to which wasn't the pub then, but to deliver a baby. So it was definitely there, and there was no doubt about the fact that that's what we drove through.
Wow, very chilling, very chilling.
Yeah, at the time, it was absolutely flipping terrifying.
Well, I think we're ready to hear some more of your choices now.
Oh, marvellous.
Yeah, we're going to take a little break and listen to some of the music that you've chosen. You chose the song you played earlier, the theme from The Fog, which is a great choice. One of my favourite pieces of music from horror films, for sure. It's fantastic.
It is great, and it is a wonderful film. It's one of John Carpenter's, certainly one of John Carpenter's best movies.
Yeah, when it was on at the cinema, I missed it.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, he said that one to me earlier, and I just was like, oh my.
Yes, I know.
Oh my.
Copyright Richard Freeman.
But we've got two more songs. We've got the Moon 02, the intro.
Ah, yes. It is. It's a Moon 02. It's very much an oddity in the world of the Hammer films.
Yeah, a great song as well.
I'd never even heard of it.
Completely mad.
Yeah, it's a great. So we've got the intro to that, and then we've got I Am the Doctor, the John
Pertwee.
Yeah, the John Pertwee.
Brilliant. Which one are we having first?
The Moon 02.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay, so we're going to listen to that, and we'll be right back.
beyond being alternative. This is Phonic FM, Exeter's no advert, playlist-free radio station, broadcasting from the heart of the city.
Beyond the mind, the empty space that circles time. I see where others stumble blind, to seek a truth they never find. Eternal wisdom is my guide. I am the Doctor. Through cosmic waste the TARDIS flies, to taste the secret source of life. A present science can't deny exists. Within, outside, behind, the latitude of human minds. I am the Doctor. My voyage dissects the course of time. Who knows, you say, but are you right? Who searches deep to find the light that glows so darkly in the night? Toward that point, I guide my fleet. As fingers move to end mankind, metallic teeth begin their grind. With sword of truth, I turn to fight the satanic powers of the night. Is your faith before your mind? Know me. Am I the Doctor?
Hello, wireless listeners. You're back with the Exe Files on Phonic FM with me, Richard Freeman, and my co-host
Alison Rockbrand. Welcome to the show.
And we're talking to the one and only Mr. John Pertwee. Are you there, John?
I'm here.
Fantastic. So, can you tell us a bit about your choices there?
Well, Moon 02 was a space opera that Hammer made, and they'd gone to different places to try and get some sort of backer. Failed on so many different counts. When it came out, the audience, the viewing public, just didn't like it. They weren't interested in in something that was so camp, that was so ridiculous, and they stayed away in droves. Indeed, Moon 02 is one of Hammer's biggest failures, and it's not even come out into DVD in this country, largely because it's a little bit too odd. And for me, it is one of the finest, best, kind of kitschish romps of the time, certainly. It's got a great cast. Warren Mitchell's in there, Catherine Schell, who played Maya in Space 1999 Season 2, and the mighty Bernard Bresslaw, who is a particular favourite of mine.
Oh, really? He's one of my favourite actors as well.
Yeah, he's great.
He's wonderful.
He's really good. And he was very much a maligned character, Alison, because while all the other carry-on people were off doing various and sundry things, Bresslaw, even though he'd been throwing custard pies at people during the day, at the end of filming, he'd just basically retire into his library and sit and read books on Judaism, and interestingly enough, he learnt a Swahili dialect for the film Carry On Up the Jungle, and he wanted to make sure that he wasn't just spouting gibberish, and he played the guide Upsy Daisy, and he put a lot of work into learning certain phrases in that particular dialect. And it wasn't until several years later, when he was in a shoe shop in Bournemouth, that a guy came up to him and he says, just wanted to thank you. And he said, right, what for? And he says, well, he's taking the trouble to learn the dialects for the of my people, and to use it in that film. So he's a great guy, really, really great guy, and very much misaligned, as I say.
Oh, how interesting. What a great story. Yeah, he's one of my favourites in the Carry On films, for sure. I always feel there's something just a little bit extra to his style.
Yes, and he looks exactly almost like the mighty Sean Histed Todd, who's a friend of Richard's and I's.
Yeah, so we've got this friend who's this tall goth. He's got a radio show as well, not on Phonic, it's another one. But he looks, if you can imagine a sort of grungy, gothy
giant
Bresslaw, he's just like him. Yeah.
He is. It was quite strange. And I seem to recall, Richard, that didn't Breslau have a thing called the Giddy Game Show?
Yes, he had this bizarre thing called the Giddy Game Show, which was an obscure children's TV animated game show about... he played a character called Gorilla, and then there was a little professor called Gus, and then a little tiny alien called Giddy. And every week they'd have this character called Princess Galaxina, who would go to a certain planet and meet the Bubble Men or the Razor Men or the Knot Men, and you had to sort of waste them with lasers before they got her. It was very, very odd. I think there's an episode of it knocking around on YouTube.
Yeah, great, really, really good. But again, he and I think Peter Butterworth and Kenneth Connor as well were kind of the three out of the carry-on actors that I greatly admire. Breslau, certainly.
Yes, I think for me it's Fenella Fielding for obvious reasons.
So moving on. The second choice, the John Pertwee I have the Doctor. Now he'd written the words to that because he basically thought that the Doctor Who theme needed some words to it, and it was tremendously good. It was great, and the fact that obviously he's the best Doctor Who helps no end.
Oh, hands down.
Yeah.
Hands down. So, we were talking about you seeing a ghost earlier on. Have you ever had any other strange experiences?
Yes, I was driving again across Woodbury Common, and a large cat, a puma or a panther, ran in front of the car, and I was going across the common quite quickly. I was driving anyway, and because I swerved to avoid it, I turned the car over 6 times, and the car was a complete and utter write-off. When the police turned up, and there were several people milling around, and the whole of the car was completely destroyed. It was a big sturdy car, but there was a tiny little space, which was the space that I was kind of steering in, so the rest of the car was completely wrecked. And when the police officer asked me what it was that I'd swerved to avoid, and I said, and it was a big cat, like a puma or a panther. And he wrote down large dog, and I said, well, actually, it was a puma or a panther. And he went, yeah. Which has always kind of annoyed me, because even though I was driving and it had been raining, you could definitely see that that's what it was. I kind of get that feeling that there was a very mild cover-up they didn't want to admit. There were big cats loose and wild roaming around Woodbury Common.
What colour was it?
It was like a mottled brown.
Oh, that would be a puma.
Yeah.
That would be a puma then.
But that was what it was. There is, I bow to your superior knowledge here, but there is a lot of difference between a dog and a puma.
Yes, there's an awful lot of difference.
Yeah.
But it reminds me of a story I heard once. A former friend of mine told me this story about a police patrol car on the outskirts of Plymouth. And they saw a car upside down in a ditch, and they stopped, and the guy was in it. He was all right. They pulled him out, and they said, well, what happened to you? Why did you crash? And he said, well, I saw Bigfoot crossing the road. This is on the outskirts of Plymouth.
Right.
I swerved in shock and crashed into the side of the road and turned the car over, and they breathalyzed him because they thought obviously he was drunk, and he was dead cold sober. So they were there scratching their heads, and a few weeks later they found out that there was a hotel somewhere where there'd been a Star Wars convention, and some drunk guy in a Chewbacca costume had been wandering around, and he crossed the road, and the guy had crashed the car.
I've not heard that before.
Do you think, John, that these types of experiences have enhanced your interest in horror and science fiction?
Well, I think, to be honest, because of what I'd had when I was growing up, I wasn't really looking for an escape, but I was looking to see other things, to try and put myself into other worlds. And I think, especially now, and I hate the term geek, but in today's kind of geek society, it's interesting how it's turned around, and it's a lot more acceptable to like the slightly different and the strange, and the popularity of that.
It is. When I was a boy, when I was a little kid, it was a totally boy thing. Girls weren't interested at all. They didn't want to know. But now, there's at least as many girls into it as there are guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a good thing.
Yes, it is, and I think that's the way I have a shop in Mansfield, and we've been going for about 10 years now, and the cross section of all the people who buy from us is male, female, and those in between, really.
You started off down here, didn't you? With
absolutely, yes. I was working in a popular furniture store at the time, and a friend of mine decided to leave, and he was running the sci-fi shop kind of thing, and it turned out that he was leaving, and I left my job to go and take over where he left, and kind of never looked back, and we stock all sorts of things, all kinds of strange and unusual things, and ordinary action figures as well. But it's an interesting take, and I thank the gods every day that I managed to be lucky enough to do my own thing for a while.
Yeah, you've got to follow your dream, haven't you?
You've got to what, sorry?
You've got to follow your dream.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and we have a life-size Dalek called Scaramanga, which is my favourite Dalek, which is the one from the John Pertwee story, Day of the Daleks. And he's kind of followed me around. Obviously, he's on wheels, and he's followed me around, and he's been in all the shops that I've had. I've had about 5 shops now.
Do you remember when there was an abandoned Dalek found in Exeter, and you and I went and wheeled it back to your shop, and we got in the newspaper for it?
Absolutely, yes. This was someone had actually set about a Dalek with a baseball bat and beaten it up, and this poor thing, it was a black Dalek, and it was shoved in a cupboard in a school, and the school had put out a cry for help because this poor thing needed to go go to a better home and be looked after. Otherwise, it was going to be disassembled. So Richard and I went to this school and found it, and it's now sitting healthily in someone's front room.
Wow.
It ended up, the guy that repaired it originally was the fella that used to have the fuel cafe in Exeter.
Yes, that's
and now
right.
He's got a cafe on a double-decker bus, hasn't he?
Yes, I don't know if fuel's still going.
No, it's long since shut. He runs a cafe from a double-decker bus that he drives.
Oh, does
around.
he?
Yeah, and he's got the Dalek in it.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, at least it's a happy ending.
So you say you left your job in order to pursue these shops. Did you find it? I mean, I guess it must be less stressful, or did you find?
Oh no, Alison, it's 57 more times stressful. It's really, it's incredibly stressful, and I stress all the time. But you have to, like Richard said, you have to try and follow your dream, because you do kind of only get the one shot at it. So you have to try and do the best you can. And I try and source toys and merchandise from all over the world, and we go and do several conventions, several Comic Cons and things like that. So that kind of, the shop I'm in now is the size of an ant's eyelid.
I tried to follow my dream, but she had a restraining order put on.
So,
that was Christina Ricci, wasn't it?
So what are the conventions then that are coming up that you're doing?
Well, they just kind of pop up all over the place, really. We don't tend to go that far, because basically, if you've got to take into the travelling costs and the setup and everything like that. So it's usually within like a 50 to 60 mile radius of where we are in the Midlands, really. But again, they're very interesting, and you get to meet all sorts of interesting people as well, not just other traders, but actors who've been in Star Wars and Doctor Who and things like that. So it's nice to sit and talk to them and find about behind the scenes stuff.
Is there anyone, any actor or celebrity or personality that you would have loved to have?
Yes, there is. It's Peter Cushing. Peter Cushing is my own personal hero, and he lived in Whitstable. And I got a friend who basically lived down the road from where Peter Cushing was, and he said that, and I was practically begging on bending knee to go down and interview him, but I literally didn't have the money to go down. But a great friend of mine was in Whitstable about a year before Cushing died, and he sat in the tea rooms that Cushing frequented, and sat and talked for about 2.5 hours with him, and at the end ended up giving him this poster to sign from the Blood Beast Terror, which Cushing wasn't that keen on. This tells the tale of a human moth, and it was very much one of the films that Cushing just didn't really like. But nevertheless, Cushing It was what, sorry?
It was dreadful.
It was. But Cushing, it's kind of embraced the role, and up until almost his dying day, he said that was possibly one of the worst films, not only that he'd ever been in, but one of the worst films ever made.
He has been in some wonderfully and wildly original films. The one there's two that stands out for me. One of them, Horror Express, which is set on a Trans-Siberian Express.
You should remake that.
Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in it, on the Trans-Siberian Express, when Christopher Lee is a paleontologist that's found an ape man frozen in ice, and he's transporting it back to England. It thaws out, turns out to be possessed by an alien, and then drinks people's intellect through their eyes. and it's got Telly Savalas as an undead Cossack.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't make them like that anymore, do they?
They don't, and it's a great shame because when you first see the Cossacks led by Savalas, there's a lady clambering all over Savalas, and I remember a popular wit and raconteur, Michael Spooner, who was watching it with me, saying that she just obviously wanted to be on telly.
And the other great one, Island of Terror.
Island of Terror with the silicates.
The silicates. There's a laboratory on this island where they're trying to find a cure for bone marrow cancer, and they breed these giant single-celled creatures to suck the cancer out of bone marrow, only that they mutate and start sucking people's bones out and leave them as just like sacks of empty skin, and then they start to breed and crawl across the island. It's wonderfully bizarre and strange and great, and there's so few films that are that original anymore.
Yes, it is. The monsters in that were very much, when they were on set, they were referred to by the actors as spaghetti monsters, because they were these kind of gelatinous blobs, weren't they, with bits of Heinz spaghetti hanging around them. But a great cast. And I seem to recall the guy who was in Night of the Demon, who played the maid bad guy, whose name escapes me now.
Carswell, the character.
That's it, Julian Carswell. Excuse me. He was in that as well. And it's a great film, really, really one of the best.
It's absolutely brilliant.
Do you have a favourite series or film?
Well, my favourite series is probably either, obviously from Great Britain, it's a selection. I like Sapphire and Steel and Doctor Who, and I am a huge fan of a television show that is well ranked in the higher echelons of cult TV fans. Now this TV show is called Come Back, Mrs. Noah. And if you've never seen it, Alison,
no, I've never seen it.
Now do pay attention to this, because this will actually change the way you vote. It's so interesting. It tells the tale of Molly Sugden, who's a cleaner on board a spaceship that's being launched from Britain, and it turns out the spaceship gets stuck in space, and Molly Sugden is there as a hilarious cleaner, obviously being weightless in one episode, and there's another episode where she discovers a space viaduct. It is a gem, and should be issued with a director's commentary straight away.
Mrs. Slocum off Are You Being Served, if you can't remember who Molly Sugden.
Oh yeah, I know her. That sounds amazing. I'm totally going to check that out.
Definitely.
It sounds incredible.
It needs a DVD release, if only to help those people in trouble.
Ian Lavender, who was Private Pike.
That's right. And of course, in the American shows, my all-time American show is Kolchak the Night Stalker.
Fantastic show.
Which tells the tale of a down at heel newspaper reporter who basically has a domineering and bumbling boss, Tony Vincenzo, and each week Kolchak has to meet and deal with a different threat to the city. So one week's a vampire and one week's a werewolf, but it's not just vampires and werewolves. There's strange moss monsters, and there's all sorts of things. So again, it was a great show, and when they remade it recently, it was absolute crud.
It reminds me a little bit of Grimm. I don't know if you've seen that.
I've seen a little bit of that. Yes, Grimm's not too bad.
That's not too bad. Yeah.
It's not too bad at all. And I think the quality of the American shows is definitely far and away outshining a lot of what we've got over here. Obviously, with Doctor Who at the moment, and I'd kind of heard rumours that they're thinking of resting it next year. It possibly needs that.
Yeah, I love the new guy. I love Capaldi, Peter Capaldi.
Yeah, Capaldi's.
It reminds me a lot of John Pertwee.
People seem to have almost a kind of a great dislike for Stephen Moffat, and they're kind of using him as almost a yardstick to beat the show with. So perhaps it needs a little bit of time to go away and have a rethink.
I think it needs a new head writer. I mean, when he hits. Moffat knocks it out of the stadium. He's done some great stuff, and he's done some stinking stuff as well.
Yeah, but it was great last week.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Yes.
Yeah, and it's great to see it go back to that old sort of thing, and also there's hints at the moment that they might be going back to Pompeii in the from the Tennant story, The Fires of Pompeii. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the show progresses from here.
It certainly will. Well, we're winding down now, so. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, John. It's been absolutely brilliant. And anyone who changes their name by deed poll to John Pertwee has got to be a bit special.
Thank you both. Thank you very much, Alison, for having me on the show.
Thank you very much. It's been fantastic having you on. It's been super interesting, and I'd love to have you on again sometime. So.
And apologies for the technical glitches.
That's all right. It was just clangers trying to invade the studio.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, the new clanger's great. That's brilliant. It's wonderful, isn't it?
Okay, well, I shall be seeing you.
See you, mate.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Bye.
So, Richard, tell us about the next little story that we're going to have, a little closing story.
This is just something I found online. It's by W.H. Pugmire, about which I know nothing. It's a short story called Yon Baleful God.
That's right.
And the god of the title refers to Tsogwa, who is a toad-like entity first written about by H.P. Lovecraft's contemporary and friend Clark Ashton Smith.
So enjoy this, and join us next week, and indeed every Friday at the witching hour on Exe Files on Phonic FM. I'm Alison Rockbrand, and we've been having the show with our co-host Richard Freeman and our special guest John Pertwee. Join us next week and every week at the witching hour. Goodbye.
This is advert-free Phonic FM.
The sapphire of the central night, wherein the stars turn grey. Clark Ashton Smith. I sat within a moonlit glade on a summer's night. The air was very still, and the starlight over Sesqua Valley seemed sad and pale. I was staring into that melancholy light when, from out of woodland shadow, a figure limped toward me. I took in his lean, dishevelled form, the shock of unruly hair, the emaciated face. How odd that the moon's glow played strangely on one of his eyes. He knelt in front of me and bent his mouth to mine. The taste of his kiss was familiar. I pulled him to the ground and made love to his throat, his mouth, his chilly cheek. Lifting my head, I looked more closely at the pale dead eye that had replaced his socket's living orb. What's this? It's something I had fashioned in Prague. Oh, Adam, I have found the lair of the forgotten god. I discovered the place where innocents were slaughtered in his name. I found the place where uncanny gems were offered to his mystery. I took one such gem and had it shaped so as to replace the eye that I have sacrificed in his name. There it is, snug in my socket, the jewel that he loved to look at, the surface of which caught his reflection in flickering torchlight. His shadow became a living stain that adhered to the gemstone I had purloined. Look closely at that ornament, my love, and see the wonder that it adds unto me. Gaze deeply into its surface, Adam, and you will see him. I touched the stiff and chilly flesh that was nearest to the artificial eye. I leaned nearer to that flesh and kissed it with my hot mouth. My lips touched the jewel's smooth surface. When I lifted my head and gazed steadfastly at that pale orb, I saw within it a swirling shadow that slowly took on form. I saw the visage that pierced that shadow with its majesty, that broke through and gazed at me with inhuman eyes. My lover raised his mouth to my ear and whispered one unholy name. That night, in bed, he spoke of forgotten deities, gods formed in chaos beyond the known dimensions, things that pulsed in alien spaces between the stars. I listened, enthralled. We had spoken often of such things. I had shown him books and sculptures, bas-reliefs and tiaras on which were depicted the likenesses of unimaginable things. He wore himself out with talking that night. The pain in his injured leg began to throb. I held him in my arms and sang him to sleep. His head pressed against my chest, and the texture of the flesh near to the demonic eye chilled me to my heart. That cold sensation slowed the pounding of my organ and seemed to seep into my veins, where it flowed toward my brain, and blessed me with unholy vision. I squatted within a vaulted chamber. Strewn before me were the dry bones of offerings devoured long ago. In lethargy I sat and dreamed, recalling a time when I had known the succulent taste of sacrifice. Near to me was the dry husk of one long-dead offering, its skeletal hand stretched toward me. Within the palm of bone were pale gems that had been offered in obsequious veneration. I discerned upon their smooth surface my hoary reflection. I gazed for an eternity at the semblance of a forgotten god. And when at last I shut my weary eyes, I dreamt of sacrifice, of cindery human substance. And when I awakened, it was to the scent of living flesh, which I but vaguely recalled. I gazed at the empty palm of bone from which my gems had been pilfered. Sniffing air, I found a fragrance of mortal flesh and tangy blood. It brought to my senses a memory of sacrificial slaughter. And then the scene melted and became dark. I lay within a shadowed chamber with my lover in my arms, his throat pressed against my mouth. I sucked at his salty flesh and bit into it. He moaned softly as I moved my tongue into the new wound. Outdoors, the night was haunted by the undulate song of numberless toads. He awakened me before dawn and took my hand. Naked, we walked into woodland, to a ring of sacrificial stones. Legend told that the poet and sculptor, William Davis Manley, had chiselled the large rocks into the likenesses of things seen in disturbed dreaming, faces that called for blood and death. I had brought my lover to this place when first I lured him to Sesqua Valley and taught him our ways. He had been a dreamy boy, lonely and forsaken by those he loved and on whom he had depended. I nurtured his wounded psyche and taught him of the old ones who would not desert him. He did not disappoint me. Alone he journeyed to the places outside the valley where he could find the arcane things. Now he had returned to share with me the lore that had educated him. Together we knelt within the ring of stones, and he whispered to me the unwholesome name. Sarthogua. I can see him, waiting patiently for when the stars come right and he will grow strong and liberated. Ah, how he hungers for cosmic freedom, to seep towards starlight and find his home. But he is weak. Only sacrifice will make him strong. Let us assist him. Adam, look, this discarded stone here, it's heavy and will do the trick. Hold it high above my head as I lay down my life for the thing that begs for veneration. Let us offer him a new sacrifice, my love. I took the heavy stone from his hands as he reclined upon the ground. His smile was a beautiful thing. I took in his handsome face, and then smashed that beloved visage with the weighty rock. Sighing, I took from the remains of his pulp the filthy gem that had usurped a living eye. I gazed hard at the shadow within its pale surface, and saw the bestial face that smiled.